Hi there, my name is Joseph Beckham, and I'm presenting my project for Assignment 3 in my Man 4583 class at UNF. For this, I worked alone, so necessarily for Part 1, I don't really have a lot to say. Is that sort of covers the like good and bad things about your partners, and discusses, introduces each partner and recommends each other's qualities and stuff like that. I worked alone, so I could do that. I would sound a little crazy just talking about how good and all the good and bad qualities about myself. Um, so I don't think that's the best idea. Um, but um, because of that, I fear that I might have a slightly shorter time than like the desired 20-minute, 30-minute mark. However, I hope not. Um, I hope to be able to cover everything and do my due diligence and make sure that this presentation is full enough that it meets that mark. So, um, without further ado, um, let me. Um, so this is my MS project file. My project was on building a computer. My sort of thought process when it came to picking the project and what I wanted to do for it was I wanted to learn like how to develop a project and how to develop um, and how to become a project manager by developing a project. And I didn't necessarily want to learn how to do something. So I've built a couple of computers in my lifetime. It's something that I'm fairly familiar with, and so uh, designing my milestones, tasks, and subtasks was kind of based off of what I know as somebody who's done it a couple of times. So like my milestone finalized part list, the way I went and did it necessarily might not be the traditional way. I actually went through and did like information, and then set the duration to 0 days, and then went to advanced and marked tasks as milestones. Did that for each of the milestones, and then for the uh, tasks and subtasks on the timeline area. I didn't necessarily. I know that it lets you sort of on the information it displays on timeline, so I use that to display on timeline, and then I just sort of went down the list and added tasks as I thought necessary and reordered them to make sense. I used my original timeline that I wanted to go for when I think it was the charter that I submitted that on, and so that was the timeline I went with, and I made this fit my timeline. Um, there are some sort of days down here, like the build necessarily takes 2 days, but all of this can be done in a day. So, like I said on uh, my lessons learned submission, don't I didn't something I genuinely don't understand when it comes to MS Project is I don't understand the um, I don't oh sorry there's a lot more here. I don't necessarily understand how to put leads and lags. So you'll notice for like the build, I actually put 23 days, and that's to assume that there's going to be some extra time for late deliveries or things that are delayed in shipments and stuff like that. I don't know how to put leads and lags, and I never was really able to figure that out super well. So I put 23 days. Um, I, and that's simply because I was just unaware of how to do that. Um, my project milestones are develop the project charter, plan for funding is sourced, finalize your part list, and then your parts are all acquired by that milestone, and then at the end you have your build complete. Those are my milestones. My different sections are the initialization phase. That's sort of consulting with advisors, people that know more than me, and asking them what their thoughts on certain parts and stuff like that. For this, I developed a work breakdown structure. I defined my budget, and Then I go into the plan and source, plan your parts and source your parts. Basically, you want to find your performance baseline, what you want, what is the computer going to be used for, and so if you desire a computer that's really good for like VFX, you want a better graphics card than you want something else. So that's very important when it comes to this. So after that, you want to basically finalize your computer, your what you desire for your specs. Then you analyze the market for your best pricing. Prioritize parts using the budget and market analysis, and then finalize the parts list. Order the parts, and then you get into the build phase, and that's pretty self-explanatory. I go into a pretty good detail. I could list all of the steps there, but that's literally the step-by-step of how you build a computer with the predecessors and what you need to complete it. The timeline, like I said, it was pretty much done automatically, but the project resources, for project resources like this, I probably, again, in hindsight, probably should have picked something different in terms of wanting to like have a something that used more resources. For this, there's not a ton of resources that you need. Although I did try and I tried to go into the rabbit hole and pull out more resources than I have ever used, in order to actually do this and provide work that I think is acceptable. So like pen and paper, I don't typically use that, but I wanted to use it so I could have more and be more sort of in depth here, like I wasn't doing something that like I tried to fill in put some filler in, so that way it made more sense and it was more cohesive all around. Pen and paper, advising, current computer, PC part picker. Again, a lot of this is something that so when it came to resources, there's not a ton of cost, and for some reason my costs have all reset. Okay. But there's no cost to a lot of these for me personally. So I think the only two costs that I really actually had were thermal paste and pen and paper, and both of those are very cheap. But those both got reset, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Okay. But obviously you can see here I assigned these resources and assigned them to what is needed. The cost incurred by each resource, like I said, I did apply these. Again, I don't know if I'm doing this right, so maybe I did it wrong, and because of that I suffered because of it. But I did apply the cost. I know how to, or at least I could try to, but for some reason, again, it got reset. So that is a little awkward. The U.S. holidays / leaves implemented in the calendar for people resources. That I did come into a couple sort of examples of that, and it was mostly like non-work days. So like not necessarily holidays, but it was like non-work days, like weekends, I believe. Came into effect of it didn't want me to work weekends, so it would move it up a couple of days or move it back a couple of days. But I didn't necessarily run into any holidays, and like I said, the MS Project seemed to me that if I ever ran into that, it automatically changed it. For me, the feelings that I have towards this project is, like I said, I have a pretty in-depth understanding of this, and I guess I could show you the rest of the timeline. I have a pretty in-depth understanding of this and what is needed of this, and sort of this process. And for me, sort of, I felt as though this was me learning how to develop a project and how to develop, how to use MS Project. I didn't know how to do that before I started this project. And still, like I said, not perfect. Clearly, the resources are broken, which is not great. But in terms of what was wrong and what was needed to be done, I said it in my lessons learned thing. I almost missed the date on the submission for this project file. I just for the previous two assignments that we had submitted, like I was the due date for the submission page had been changed, so I just got used to looking at the calendar, and I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have gotten comfortable. I should have done my due diligence and looked ahead of time and stuff like that. I didn't, and that was on me. But thankfully I didn't. I managed to get it submitted in time. But other than that, what was technically wrong and what needed to be done during what was wrong, there wasn't really much. Again, I worked alone, so again, I'd sound a little crazy if I went and talked about all the problems that I had with myself. Uh, in terms of what was needed to be done during each phase of work, I'm going to interpret that as like personally for me. I would say a lot of this, I like to look up sort of examples so that I have a good understanding of like a good example of what a thing is. And I believe there were examples for like the project charter that you provided as well. And uh, I use those examples, but like a lot of them are all different. And that's something I learned, is that this isn't necessarily something that has to be there are templates, and that there's sort of a design, an overall design that's needed to be used, but the individual like design choices are different, and so that kind of threw me off a little bit. But that was interesting, looking at different sort of takes and what was needed, and maybe again, this is something like another step down the rabbit hole of like are certain types of projects, like, does that change versus the design and layouts of certain like things change for different types of projects, and again, that's something that I'm genuinely unfamiliar with and don't know. The in terms of real life project scenarios, I don't typically feel as though I've ever like fully fleshed out a plan as much as I have doing like this type of project management sort of planning, and like I thoroughly understand something. I intend on buying a copy, or I don't even know how Microsoft does it, but I intend on buying a copy or getting a license for MS Project. It's something that I want to use more often because it's pretty intuitive, and also, like, again, this is a pretty good way to sort of flesh out a plan. Obviously this wasn't the best use of it, but I think that it's definitely a good way to. I could see this being used on a bigger, much more complex project, and being able to flesh out a plan this would be very useful for that. Again, like I said, I didn't necessarily use it probably to its fullest extent. And this course, in terms of helping me understand how about the projectized way of doing things, I would say like it is woken me up to the idea of like the complexity of certain things and how important it is to keep people on the same like sort of wavelength, and how important that is, like, creates the needs and the necessities for in-depth planning and sort of no mistakes, like no room for error. You don't leave any room for error. The more you plan something out and the more you have things thought out ahead of time, it doesn't leave room for error, and sort of the need for that because of these complex sort of projects. Again, not a great example here in terms of a complex project, but I can see that in the future, in terms of like my future employment, where I'm going to be in 10 years, if I ever am in the situation where I do need to plan something or go through the process of planning something like this, I definitely can see that like project management and the sort of the um, technique of going through and planning things out this way can keep everybody on the same page and can and sort of like I said, doesn't leave any room for error, which I think is a pretty big risk in sort of planning a project. So um, thank you for watching. Like I said, this is about 15 and a half minutes. Sorry that it didn't go as long as I probably should have. Like I said, I didn't have part one, so I couldn't necessarily. I probably missed out on a lot of time that a bigger group had. So, um, but in terms of this project, I've had a lot of fun, and thank you for watching.